He even gave them a kind of a password. Quote, "My Lord has need of it and will send it back as soon as he is done." Close quote. That ensured the permission would be granted for the colt to be taken. I don't know about you, but to me when I read that, it sounded a lot like a very smart move on the part of a subversive who has planned a counter-demonstration to the procurator's imperial entrance. Someone bent on staging a nonviolent demonstration to attract attention and perhaps make himself known to other like-minded visitors and residents. Of course, that may just show that I came of age in the 1950s and 60s, but news from North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula in the last month or so echoes those images too. Based on Jesus' penchant, as reported in all of the Gospels, for thinking and acting outside the box, actually touching the sick and the maimed to heal them, conversing with women, dining with tax collectors, urging potential followers to become like children, and to give up their material wealth, it seems not too great a stretch to suggest that Jesus might take such a deliberate action to make a political statement about the illegitimacy of the Roman imperial rule and the claims of the emperors since Augustus to titles such as Son of God, Savior, Bringer of Peace, through violence. Throughout Jesus' ministry, the thrust has been to present an alternative paradigm to the prevailing dominator system. His was a paradigm of partnership and community, governance from the bottom up rather than the top down, equitable access for all rather than maximum access for the selected few and little or nothing for the masses. According to the gospel attributed to Mark, after paying a cursory visit to the temple, where he looked around, checked things out, doesn't say that in the gospel, but that's what I think about. He looked around at everything. He left the city and went home to friends in an outlying village to spend the night. I'm going to diverge from this because things are running long. On the morning of the second day, he went back to the temple, and that's where the episode that we know as the cleansing of the temple occurred. The important thing about the cleansing of the temple is that modern scholars see it as not so much a striking out against sacrifice, but more as a reflection on the ambiguity of the temple, which was both a place of worship for the Jews and a place where the functionaries of the temple were responsible for making sure that the Jews paid their taxes to Rome and that they didn't make trouble during the holidays. The other important thing that happens in the temple in the first few days is that Jesus refused, as Gustafson noted, to give answers to moral questions, to give moral answers to moral questions. He either turned the questions back on the questioner and forced them to answer, to think about it, or he told parables. Parables are stories that are open to interpretation, that allow the listeners to talk with one another and figure out what was meant. Unlike allegories, which have a particular message that they are conveying. And one of the things that has happened in the telephone game of converting the stories about Jesus that were told by his early followers to the written Gospels is that a lot of the parables have been converted to allegories, either directly in the text, or there has been a sort of a standard interpretation placed on them. It's important to try to read the parables as parables, open-ended, without a defined response, without a clearly defined message. I'm going to stop here and urge you to branch out in your reading if you haven't done so already. There are lots of good books. Borg and Crossan individually and as a pair have written between them probably close to 20 or 25 books. Scott Gustafson has only this one book out, but if you really want to read a rabble-rouser, read John Shelby Spong, who used to be the Episcopal Bishop in the Diocese of Newark, who will knock your socks off, even your UU socks. And be sure to come back next week. I'm not sure how it happened, but Richard is going to be talking about Jesus next week.